We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
You can say you're the best. You can say that all of this will do everything possible, but in the lack of evidence, very few times you're going to have somebody just goes, yeah, I trust you, I believe you.
You did it! Congratulations! World's best cup of coffee. Great job, everybody. It's great to meet you.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk housing starts being down and good lighting design. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek episode 439. It's not your house. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my longtime friends. First, we have Uncle Richie. It's Richard Fregosa. He's the principal at Fregosa Design. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing good, buddy. It's actually been a while since I've been able to hang on the show. So I've been with my partner in crime, Steve, over on the control side of things.
I don't take it personally.
That's all right. It's good to see you.
I like Steve. It's fine. Then we've got Mr. Jeremy Glowacki. He's the executive editor at Residential Tech Today. How you doing, Jeremy?
Doing well, Matt. I appreciate you having me on. It's a good warm up for my brain to get back into a regular work week after, I don't know if you heard, there's a holiday that we have in the U.S.
Shut up.
July 4th. That was last week. So a lot of time off.
Fun.
Brain was kind of in a fog until just now. So hopefully I can get it kicked into gear.
You'll be fantastic. Speaking of foggy outlooks, see what I did there? This comes to us from CE Pro. We're gonna kick it off with this story on housing starts continue their slip in May. High interest rates continue to batter home builders as rising home prices continue to push many prospective buyers into pushing off their purchases. Housing starts dropped 5.5% from the month prior. Single family numbers specifically dropped 5.2%. In their seasonal adjusted rates, and MDUs, multifamilies, dropped 6.6% from April as well. This is obviously a U.S. number. I can tell you that the Canadian numbers are similar. A lot of this also stems from the fact that money is just very expensive right now. Rich, let me start with you. Starts are down in new home. This has been an ongoing trend for quite a few months now, if not longer than that. Resale values, resale inventory in many places is higher than it's ever been, again, in the last couple of months, even in high demand places like Texas and Florida, etc. What does this look like, and how does this relate to our industry? Or is this just another wave that we have to ride?
Well, I think you're always going to have an effect in our industry because we're convenience items. And you always have to remember that. As much as we make sure that we get the message out that we're part of the construction industry, we're not part of the vital construction industry. There's a big difference when you're either rebuilding or you're purchasing a new home. You have certain expectations. You expect to have a toilet. You expect to have a refrigerator. The technology that we have is becoming more of a must-need item. But even on that side, it's still the networking side of things, where the functionality still, in terms of the industry, is on mobile. What can make mobile work better? So it's going to be all of the infrastructure that occurs within a house. In terms of kind of our bread and butter of what we were used to 20, 30 years ago, of you sell a TV and you get markup on that and you get all the speakers and everything in there, those models have changed and they can be add-ons. And so when somebody's making a decision between a Viking range or, it's something from Sears, that is where their budget's going to go. We've always had that conversation. And I mean, we've been talking about it since the inception of CEDIA, right? Which is your competition is not the other AV dealers. Your competition are all of the amenities in a home. And so when you're dealing with the slowdown in housing starts, or you're seeing a tightening of the budget, anytime you take a look at a budget, when that red line comes out, you have to know and you have to prepare yourself that you are going to be the first one on that chopping block. So a big part of what do you do with this information? If you've been in business long enough, you take the lessons that you learn from the housing meltdown. You take the information you learned from the dot bombs. You take all of these key financial indicators that put a lot of people out of business. And hopefully the people that survived learned how to retool and move through. Now, if you're a new business and things were going great and you had new housing starts and you're doing pre-wires and doing packages and everything else, you have to take a look back and take a look at your lessons that were learned beforehand. Because, just because things are good today, you'll appreciate that. But you have to consider that in construction, you're always going to be competing for some very different dollars. So what this winds up telling me, and we were actually talking about it before we were recording, is the best customer you can find is the one you already have. And so I see that when trends like this happen, successful dealers are doubling down on building out their existing customer base. They're making the extra phone call. They're focusing on things on segments that they haven't before: shading, lighting, creature comforts, network. A big thing, especially here in California because of the grid, is being able to deal with battery backup and hardening your systems and hardening your networks. We're seeing a big tick in simple things like having failover networks, where if the system goes down and you lose your primary internet service, already building into the system cellular backups, secondary backups. That is a fast way to get in to an existing client and say, hey, look, we noticed that you've had outages from XYZ internet provider. I know that you're still working from home. You're doing all of these things. Have I told you about this? And those becomes the lead-ins, because our industry more and more is less about AV. We love it. I love it. It's where my passion and my pedigree and where I fell in love with this industry came from. But, we have to start using the fact that we are technologists, and trying to sell another projector or a media room, or a distributed audio system is not going to serve you the purpose necessarily when you see indicators like this. You have to think broader. You have to think wider, because if one segment starts to dwindle a little bit, have the other segments that you're working in maintain you. And then if the other one comes up, that's great. But it's just business sense at that point. And our CEDIA market, and I love it, is built with people who are passionate about the technology. They love it. They love talking about it. They love playing with it. And at the same time, you can't let your passion override your brain. And so, this is just an indicator of, we've said it before, right? Be brutal with your weaknesses, right? Where are you weak as a company? Where are the markets that you're not maximizing in? You start doing, you just start looking for the opportunities. And I think that if you use it not as a sky is falling situation, but as an opportunity to say, hey, before things get really bad, I should be investing my time and making sure that we are expanding the breadth and width of what we do and getting your message out. And again, like I said, best time when you see new housing starts go down, start hitting your existing clients, right? Start going after the retrofit market, because there's riches in those niches.
That's a good point. All right, Jeremy. This is the lowest housing start since July of 2020. Okay. As far as volume, right? It has been dropping since essentially the start of the year. Should we be looking at long-term effects yet, or is it still too early? Knowing that obviously from 2020 on, we were dealing with a lot of pandemic related stuff, right? So yes, it's the lowest, but those numbers were shockingly high through the pandemic. Are we hitting that point where we should start to be a little concerned with, the fact that housing starts have not increased more?
I don't think so. I do think that you can get caught up in analyzing numbers and big trends and not look at your micro kind of community where you are and your market and focusing on what you know locally. There are opportunities everywhere in the country. You just have to go find them, like Rich was saying. They're not, this doesn't mean the sky is falling. This is just a down period. And we've had so many that are boom periods where people are artificially believing in the hype of we're going to just make, so much money here. We can't even keep up with all this work. Well, slow down and do an assessment of what you're good at. Like Rich was saying, you're going to find ups and downs, focus on doing really good quality work, figure out a plan for your service, recurring revenue, that type of thing. Get your clients on service plans if you can. Use the ones that the manufacturers have set up. I know some of those have been controversial, but a lot of folks have used that as motivation to come up with their own version of that. And look at here at say MDU is down a little bit, but that's another diversity is where you get into the MDU market, you get into the light commercial market or, whatever you want to call it. There's always something that's going to step in the way of the other thing that's down and figure out what that is in your local market. Don't get caught up in the sky being, falling on you because you've read some things being, negative. But yeah, I think that we're seeing a trend here, but as we get through the presidential election, we get through some of the inflationary, issues that we've had going on, it'll tick back up. And not all of our business is new home construction. That's very important, obviously, but there's so much more in retrofit that you can be doing. So I definitely think you don't want to get caught up in too much of the data right now.
Something came up that I was thinking about just right, when we're thinking about it and talking about this and just kind of as your business, even if you're a 1 or 2 person operation, using this as kind of the launch off point to remember to invest in your people. Because, say you do see a downturn, you have to start considering your overhead costs, your payroll costs, all of these things. The great thing about people is that if people feel that you're vested in them, they'll help work with you through the downturns. If they feel that they're just only there to fill a need and fill a cog, and we went from 4 to 15 people and it's gangbusters, and then all of a sudden you get to the point where oh wait, 5 of you haven't worked this week because I don't have any projects. Mm-hmm. Learning to invest in your people, learning to refocus on training. I know that's what we've been doing as we've seen our shift in residential and what we've been doing. We've been focusing a lot more on retraining and kind of rebranding. And even for us, we're going back in and our user interfaces. We're completely cycling through new versions of user interfaces that we're presenting to people going, hey, times have changed, things are coming through, but that caused us to actually spend more time training to figure out the new tools that were available. And I think that happens in terms of establishing a reason to revisit your best practices, right? Mm-hmm. If your techs are taking too long, if you're over on jobs, right? So then you got to start maximizing getting the most out of every dollar, right? If money's more expensive, then you work on getting the jobs finished on time, staying on budget. And where does all of that come from? It comes from best practices. And the best practices comes from training and working with people. Because when you're busy and you got everybody out and all you're worried about is we got 3 jobs this week and we got to get in and we got to get out and do it, that's always when the corners get cut, right? Yeah. Because there's more stuff coming in. You use these opportunities for this to be able to say, okay, time to tighten up, clean up our game so that we are maximizing the profit and not doing just enough to get to the next one. Because that tends to be long-term what causes companies problem. Not a downturn, but their work starts to suffer because they feel they're too busy and they start getting away from what made them successful in the first place.
That was very good, Rich. All right, let's change topics for a moment. This comes to us also from CE Pro and David Warfel. Opinion piece: good lighting design lies in compromise. David talks about how the challenges of being able to reconcile lighting aspirations within the time and budget constraints of a home building partner. Go read through the article. David's one of the best at this as far as designing lighting systems and working with builders on it. He hits a couple of really interesting points as far as finding ways to, really build that collaborative and productive relationship and conversation with the builders as your clients are looking for lighting design, et cetera, and integrating those into the home. Jeremy, I want to start with you on this one. This has been an ongoing conversation ever since lighting design and lighting fixtures became something that our industry started to look at, right? Was how do we generate those quality relationships with builders? Just like anything else, as Rich said off the top, the majority of what we do is not vital to construction and to the build of a house. Lighting is vital, lighting design is not. How do you go about trying to win over builders to understand the importance of quality lighting and quality lighting design, more importantly, and how that may not be whatever the electrician or the builder is just wanting to toss in the ceiling to keep the job moving?
Yeah, I think there are 2 points with it. Lighting design is one thing, and just the quality of light is another thing, kind of. I mean, they're related, but you could have a lighting design which is very intricate with layers and levels and artwork being highlighted and things like that, where you really have to work with the homeowner on their plan and what they're looking for in their interior design and overall look at the home. But the quality of light just alone, if all you were doing was putting can lighting in with higher quality LED, is an improvement over what your typical builders are putting in still to this day. Like, obviously, what has been the production builder quality for years has been pretty inferior in terms of placement. There's a kind of a fun reference that always gets made, I think, in these lighting conferences you go to. 4 cans and a fan is kind of like that look that you get in a family room, and it's just very basic. It doesn't cover the room properly. It just gets the builder through a layer of the process at a very basic level. And so getting, I guess, the buy-in from the homeowner themselves is really important. Really explaining what the quality of light differences are. Obviously, there's a premium involved in the pricing there, so that you have to get over that hump. And just working with your design team to educate them in what's possible and how you work into that process and work with the electrician and all of that stuff. So it's an education, it's a process. And David makes the point, as experienced as he is, it's not an easy thing to accomplish, and it's a lot of compromise working with the design team. So I don't know if there's like a real perfect answer here, but it's a process you have to work through, and you have to definitely get buy-in from the end user, client, homeowner, or you're not going to get anywhere with it.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. All right, Rich, wrap this up for me. He makes a couple really good points in the article. And again, I love what David is doing with his company, but he's talking a lot about finding a compromise, right? Between the builders, the designers, and the lighting designers to, again, make a cohesive package that everyone's happy with. one of the other aspects that he brings in is the fact that no one seems to photograph their projects after sunset, because again, the lighting design typically sucks, for lack of a better term, right? And if you look at, if you talk to any photographer, they will tell you, we shoot at golden hour, we want that natural light streaming in, which is valid, but you also should be able to design a space to look as good at night as it does during golden hour or when the sun is streaming into that room. So where's the compromise between trying to design some actual quality light, right, in a house, and doing something that is, shall we call it, semi-affordable and obtainable for, you know, our average customers? Because to me, that is the disconnect. I see a lot of, especially from our industry, designs that look like nightclubs, which is not how the majority of people outside of Miami want to live. And you can send me all the hate mail you want on that one, but it's atrocious. But we should be able to create beautiful interiors with light at a semi-obtainable price point that, again, the builders will not fight as much over. Is there a potential common ground here?
You know, it comes down to, I mean, this is a lighting article, but you could literally just search and replace networking, high performance audio, high performance video, distributed video, right? This is all about learning how to play in the sandbox, right? And again, this industry is filled with people who are passionate. And sometimes the hardest part, and I tell this when I work with anybody, you have to be more willing to be heard than to be right. If you are so focused on being right that what you're doing is the best and nothing else we're not going to cut any corners and it should be this and be that, you're not living there. It's not your house. It's not, you don't know your family structure. You don't know all of the other negotiations that are going on within that space. And a lot of times when, and again, we hear it time and time again, especially dealing with builders or with design teams. And I'm kind of on the outside because I don't sell equipment, but, and we kind of come in as a project facilitator. The gripe number one, when we are dealing with some of the low voltage contractors, is they come in as cowboys, right? This is what they do. This is what they're going to do. And the ability to play well with others doesn't come up in the conversation. They want to just deal with the end user because they know what's best. You will not last long in terms of a collaborative solution with other affiliated professionals with that route. And what he's saying is exactly that. Figure out which hill you're going to fight on, right? Because the question is, if you can find a way that is a compromise, and a compromise is not a loss. A compromise does not mean that something's bad. A compromise means that you've made an educated, value-driven decision as to what you feel was going to be equitable to the investment. And honestly, if you're really good at what you do, that's what you should be striving for anyway, right? Because a lot of times the dealer, the installing person, doesn't necessarily have the project background or the rest of the projects that really show, hey, this is what an all-out project looks like. This is what, this is when you have your portfolio, right? Here's what tunable lighting does in a daytime effect and a nighttime effect. Some, lighting's visual, right? You don't have your portfolio. If you're trying to sell lighting and you do not have a portfolio of what lighting looks like in a space, even just a photo of a couple of different settings in a room, how are you going to explain lighting to somebody? They're not going to spend more just because you told them to. And so, the compromise becomes a matter of how do you present it? Where's the value that comes from it? And where's the evidence you have to support what you're proposing? And that's really what he's talking about, which is create evidence, right? You can say you're the best. You can say that all of this will do everything possible, but in the lack of evidence, very few times you're going to have somebody just goes, yeah, I trust you. I believe you. No problem. Yeah. Away we go. So, with this, and honestly, like if you're looking at getting into lighting, a lot of the manufacturers, the fixture manufacturers, have simulation tools now. You can do AR work with it. You can, again, invest in your tools, right? If you want to sell something that you feel is what you do the best, and you're the best in the region for XYZ, then have the tools and the evidence that support it, not just saying it. And if you can't do that, then you better learn how to compromise quickly, because you're never going to sell anything if you just come in saying, we're going to do it this way or we're not.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, let's wrap it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Jeremy, if people want to connect with you, learn more about residential tech today, or find your podcast, where can they do that?
Yeah, just visit restechtoday.com, and you can find our podcast on there as well. And find us on YouTube as well if you want to subscribe to that channel. And check out our newsletter. We come out twice a week, so you can keep up with the news as well. So thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Always. Thank you for being here. Uncle Richie, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Fregosa Design, or catch your podcast as well, where can they do that?
You can find us on the interwebs, on the socials at @Fregosa. The website's fregosadesign.com. Or you can hopefully find us on a pretty much a monthly basis on A State of Control with my partner Steve Greenblatt, where we talk about all of the affairs of the control systems industry. And if you're interested in control systems and kind of how the sausage is made, check us out there. But first and foremost, I hope you can find me here on AVNation.tv and our suite of shows that serve all of our verticals. And most importantly, just support our sponsors.
I like it. All right. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter or X at Matt T. Scott and most other social platforms. But more importantly, as Richie said, please visit avnation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek,
the network for the AV industry.
Hi, this is Jennifer Goodyear
and Erica Carroll
from the Women in AV podcast, where we are encouraged by the incredible stories of women in AV.
Listen in on fun, empowering conversations as we chat with inspiring women, breaking barriers and creating their own path in the industry.
Check out Women in AV on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.